Hello there, everybody. It's Dr. David Nichols, and we are continuing on in the book of Acts. I'm so glad you've joined us today. And once again, I know I've said this before, but it's still true. This book is so full of truth. It's so full of power and the glory of the Lord. And so just let that land on you today and what we're studying here today. Of course, we're in the latter part of the book, in the life of Paul, as described to us by Luke in this second volume of the Diegesis, the structured narrative, which we call the book of Acts. So chapter 27 is where we are starting today. Remember now, Paul has appealed to Caesar, and he has stood before several governors and King Agrippa and all these guys. Now it's time for that part of Roman law to be fulfilled upon Paul. That is, if he appeals to Caesar, then they're going to get him there, no matter what it takes. And that's what this chapter 27 is about. So I want to, before we start into the chapter, I want to just remind you of something, because verse 1 says, when it was decided that we should sail to Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to one named Julius, a centurion of the Augustan regiment. So in other words, they said, well, we're in Caesarea and we need to travel to Rome. And, you have to adjust your thinking a little bit here, because what we would say is, well, okay, let's buy a ticket, on whatever airline, United or Delta or something, or let's just fly over there. Remember, no airplanes, no trains, no automobiles. This is the pre-modern world. And if you're going to get from Caesarea, let's map it out for you here. If you're going to get from, which Paul needs to do, if you're going to get right from here, Caesarea, to over here, which is, where is it here? Rome, right there. If you're going to go by land, it's going to take you a long, long time. So they had great sailing ships, and so what Paul did was went around like this, and then down under here like this, and then around over through here. This is where all the action was, out here in the Adriatic, and through the little isthmus here, and then on up to Rome. That's how Paul's journey to Rome was executed. So let's look into the specifics of it now. So Paul and the other prisoners are in charge of this Julius, the centurion. Verse 2 says, so entering a ship of Adramyttium, we put to sea, meaning to sail along the coasts of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. Remember, we've encountered him before in the book of Acts. He's also mentioned in some of Paul's epistles. And the next day we landed at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him liberty to go to his friends and receive care. When we had put to sea from there, we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were contrary, and that's what I just showed you on the map here. And when we had sailed over the sea, which is off Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing to Italy, and he put us on board. Now let's just show you one more thing on the map here. One of the main parts of commerce in the ancient Roman Empire was the headquarters here, Rome, had to have food, mainly in the form of wheat. And most of the wheat was grown down here in the Nile Delta of Egypt, which was very fertile soil. And so there were these great ships, merchant ships, that carried the wheat across the Mediterranean Sea here and up to Rome. And it is one of these ships coming out of Alexandria, Egypt, that figures into this story. So in verse 6, they get on board this vessel, and then verse 7 says, when we had sailed slowly many days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, the wind not permitting us to proceed, we sailed under the shelter of Crete off Salamon. And I just showed you that on the map there as well. Passing it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lasea. Now when much time had been spent and sailing was now dangerous because the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, men, I perceive that this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but also our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than the things spoken by Paul. Okay, the captain wants to get the voyage over because he wants to be paid. The owner of the ship wants to get the wheat to Rome because it's his business, and if it doesn't get there, he doesn't get paid. So we have some economic realities here as well. In verse 12, because the harbor was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also, if by any means they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, opening toward the southwest and northwest, and winter there. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, a tempestuous wind arose, headwind it was, called Euroclydon. Notice this wind had a name. These sailors knew the name of this wind. And that's very interesting. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive. Okay, now bear in mind, this is a sizable body of water. This is the Mediterranean Sea, and by now they're out in the open sea, as we showed you here, with huge waves and high winds. When they had taken it and running under shelter, verse 16, of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. Everyone scream right out loud, what is the skiff, Doctor?
Doctor, what is a skiff?
The skiff is a small boat that is attached to the bigger boat, which if you have to do something in shallow water or when you're getting close to shore, you use the skiff. So it's probably a boat like ours today would be 14 or 16 feet long, and you just let it down and you can do things that you can't do. It's maneuverable that you can't do with the big ship. So when we had taken it on board, that is the skiff, they used cables to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run aground on the Syrtis sands, they struck sail and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed, the next day they lightened the ship. On the third day we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Now that means it's getting very serious, okay? When you throw over the ropes and the pulleys and all the other things that you need to run a ship like this, you know you're in big trouble. In verse 20 it says, now when neither the sun nor the stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we would be saved was finally given up. You can imagine this, right out on this vast body of water. Here, the Mediterranean, they're out here somewhere, being blown around by waves, trying to do what they can, but they pretty much have lost control of where the ship is going. And so the hope that we would be saved was finally given up. But after long abstinence from food, Then Paul stood in the midst of them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not have sailed from Crete and incurred this disaster and loss. And now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship." Okay, now this is a change from what Paul said when they were taking off. He said that there was danger of them losing their lives. But bear in mind, all through this trip, Paul certainly has been praying. So other people have been praying. Remember, many times when a warning is given to an individual or a group that something bad is going to happen, it's a conditional warning. Prayer and calling on God can move the hand of God, and that's certainly what happened here. So Paul says, "I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For there stood by me this night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar, and indeed God has granted you all those who sail with you.'" So here you have what I just mentioned a moment ago, an amazing answer to prayer, and Paul standing in a most unlikely place to, in a sense, now become the pastor of this ship. So he just, and to take care of them, almost shepherding them like sheep, because the Lord has given him revelation on how to do this. If you will obey and do what I say, as God has revealed, we will not lose our lives. Very, very important. I want to just challenge you with that today. When you are in strenuous circumstances and you don't know what to do, remember what was spoken over you. Remember what was prayed over you, and call out to God, because he wants to hear you. He wants to answer. And we're going to see here in our next session this amazing conclusion of this story, how all the people on this ship, their lives could be saved in spite of this terrible storm that's blowing them all over the place. So be encouraged with that today, and walk in peace in your walk with the Lord. God bless you.